Apollo is the god of the sun in Greek and Rome mythology. Apollo's Chariot is the name of a hypercoaster at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. This video is going to be my full review of that coaster. Let's get into it. Apollo's Chariot is the first ever hypercoaster from the world-renowned Bolliger & Mabillard, also known as B&M. Just based on that, I didn't think it would live up to the many other highly praised hypercoasters out there. We'll get into that a little later on in the video though. Apollo's Chariot was built in 1999 and is located in the Italy section of the park. That's a bit of a stretch though. For the most part, Apollo's Chariot runs through the woods. There's barely any path interaction, especially after the addition of Tempesto, the Skyrocket 2 clone. This makes it a little hard to expect what's coming from the ride experience. I will admit, I was expecting a grand entrance to the ride, maybe a nice big sign with a good view behind it. Instead, I was met with a tent and small sign. I'm not gonna lie, I thought it looked a little carnival-like. Kinda weird. This coaster does lack in theming, I can't deny that, but that can probably be blamed on its old age. Apollo's Chariot is over 20 years old. Here's my opinion on its age. It may look like it's 20 years old. This can be seen by the purple track and yellow supports that are slowly fading away. However, I don't think it rides like a 20-year-old coaster. I thought it was still pretty smooth. When you get to the station, you board the first generation B&M Hyper trains, or in this case, the Chariot. The very front of the train has a nice emblem on the front to make it look a lot more grand. Each train is 9 rows long and seats 4 riders per row for a total of 36 riders per train. Apollo's Chariot runs 3 trains at a time. The restraints are the classic clamshells. The only difference between these trains and the more common ones I've seen on other hypercoasters is the seat design. These seats are squared off at the top. I don't think there's any difference in the ride experience from it, it just looks a little different. Moving into the ride layout, Apollo's Chariot immediately begins with a climb up the 170-foot tall lift hill. The view is nice as long as you're overlooking the forest and not the parking lot to the side. Also, it's good to mention that the sun is very hard to avoid on the way up. It's kind of ironic because Apollo is the god of the sun, but in terms of ride experience, it's not that cool. I would prefer not to get blinded, thank you very much. The train hits the pre-drop and then the actual drop. There are a couple of things here that makes this coaster more unique than some of the other hypers out there. I have found that the pre-drop severely impacted the experience of the first drop. For example, the front row does not get hang time over the major drop as the train is almost all the way over the crest of the lift hill. On the other hand, in the back row, you don't necessarily get yanked over the lift hill. Instead, it is a small drop downward, nothing too crazy. Then directly after that, you fly down the huge hill with a great amount of airtime. I gotta say, both experiences are fun. The 210-foot drop is where Apollo's Chariot gets its hypercoaster classification. At the bottom, the coaster hits its top speed of 73 miles per hour and crosses the river. Since exact measurements are hard due to the terrain, the hill heights that you will hear for this coaster will be the drop height. So then you fly into a camelback with a drop of 131 feet. This hill provides some great airtime. And there's a small hut at the bottom. Honestly, I don't know why it's there. It's like a tunnel, but really short, and doesn't really fit the theme at all. Next is another hill with a bank and turn at the top. The drop of that is 144 feet and dives right next to the river. Here's another unique thing about Apollo's Chariot. Due to the terrain difference, the second hill actually has a bigger drop than the first. This can be observed through the rest of the layout. That being said, this hill does not necessarily give the forces you would expect. It could be due to a set of trim brakes that can be found while rising up this hill, or the bank and turn at the top of it. Exiting the drop, the coaster starts a massive helix. I would say this is a major dead spot on Apollo's Chariot. The size of this helix is crazy, turning more than 360 degrees. It starts low to the ground and rises around 102 feet off the ground. I'm sure it's possible to gray out on this turn if the right conditions are presented. That didn't happen to me though. Coming after is a twist and rise into the mid-course brake run. Overall, I would say this is the basic first half for a hypercoaster. Now here comes the classic B&M Bunny Hill Run, as I like to call it. The drop off the mid-course is only 48 feet. There is some airtime, but nothing too crazy with that one. The second has an 87-foot drop down to cross the river. The airtime on this one was really strong. Rising up, you hit another set of trim brakes. Unlike the first ones, I found these to be very noticeable. The train felt like it had stopped on the way up. At the top, you dive to the right and swoop back up to the left. Then there is a small drop of 16 feet. Again, it's not necessarily crazy airtime, but it can be felt here. There is then an upward slanted straight track. What followed was probably my favorite part of the ride. Originally, I thought this was going to lead right into the final brake run. I figured the straight track was just to get a little extra distance on the entrance to it. I had taken that deep breath and started to process what had just happened. I could not have been more wrong though. There's actually one more drop at 49 feet into a ditch, which then rises up into the final brake run. I think this is one of the strongest, if not the strongest moment of airtime on this coaster. I would classify most of the airtime on Apollo's Chariot as floater, except for this hill. I think the pure unexpected drop was what got me, but this element has become my favorite part of the ride. You can also find the on-ride photo here. Through all my experiences, I would suggest the back row. I think you feel more of the airtime back there. It's also worth noting that Apollo's Chariot is pretty smooth over its 4,882 feet of track, especially for its age, and it has a great duration at 2 minutes and 15 seconds. I think now is a good time to talk about how Apollo's Chariot stands up to the other, more modern hypercoasters. Out of the hypers I've personally ridden, this one shocked me. I was expecting a kind of forceless ride experience with it being the first ever B&M hyper. I was completely wrong about that, as Apollo has some great moments of airtime. I do think it's fair to say that B&M has improved their craft over time, but I would still put Apollo's Chariot out against some of the best hypers. The setting of Apollo's Chariot rushing through the woods makes a really cool ride experience, but the queue kind of fails the coaster. So while I want to put this coaster above Mako, I can't really do it. It's just not fair. However, in terms of layout, I think Apollo's Chariot is right behind. I am planning on getting more rides on Mako, so this opinion might change later. For right now, that is my honest opinion, but I still put Apollo below Mako, so don't kill me in the comments. So for my final score of the very first B&M hypercoaster, Apollo's Chariot, located at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, I give it an 8 out of 10. I truly believe this is among the better hypercoasters I've ridden. It's just missing a couple of things to be elite. First off, it's missing a great theme or story portrayed either through the queue or coaster. If you look at its neighboring coaster, Verbolten, it's a great family coaster. One reason it's so highly regarded by everyone though is because of its story and theme. Coming back to Apollo's, I think that's the main thing missing. Another side note is maybe making those hills a little more forceful. For instance, throughout the layout there were a couple of hills that kind of lacked in the airtime department. I said they did give a little bit, but not enough to make this coaster elite, which is what we want in a 10 out of 10. So that's going to do it for my review of Apollo's Chariot at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you liked the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.